The Zohar opens up with these words. The Elam Mishpatim, it says the following. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai speaking. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is speaking. And what does he say? He says, bear with me, I'm going to read it straight from inside so we have it accurate. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, sorry about that. So I said, these are the laws, or he says, these are the ordinances that you shall place before them. And Rabbi Shimon, this is the beginning of the Zohar of this chapter. The Targum, which is an Aramaic translation of the Bible, of the Torah, translates as, these are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. So interesting, instead of Tosim being place, which would be like, presenting laws before, it's arrange. The question is, what does this word arrange mean? What is being arranged here? You could say these are the laws that you teach, these are the laws you shall implement, these are the laws you shall follow. The word arrange immediately implies a deeper meaning. So of course there are many different interpretations, and the Kabbalistic one, the Sod, the esoteric one, goes like this. This refers to the coordination of Gilgulim, the order of reincarnation. The Hebrew word for reincarnation is Gilgul. If you know some Hebrew, the word wheels comes from Galgalim. Galgal is a wheel. So you say something turns, a cycle is a Gilgul. So interesting, the word in Hebrew for reincarnation is actually cycles. A cycle. And we'll understand that in a moment. So this refers to the order. So arrange means these are the ordinances, these are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. It's talking about the cycle of the soul's journey, the Gilgulim, which are the judgments of the soul that must be reincarnated and returned to this world to repair something it may have missed. And then he goes on to interpret the actual opening verses, verse by verse, in this context. How each law, each detail here, is another description of this whole order of cycles. So this Zohar becomes a fundamental text, which is really the first place where you have a text that discusses this matter. Now, here is a few key lines that are, I guess, little eye-catching lines that make this Zohar particularly intriguing and also cryptic. And without full the commentaries on the Zohar, it would be almost impossible to fully understand the Zohar's meaning. But I'll try to somewhat distill it and explain it in terms that we can all relate to. And above all, as I said, in relevant terms. This isn't just about getting to know what is reincarnation, but also its personal relevance to our lives. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai continues by interpreting the verses, which I'll soon sum up. And he says the following. He says to his circle of disciples, now is the time to reveal a number of closely guarded secrets concerning Gilgul. Which means he emphasizes that this is a closely guarded secret, and now is the time to reveal it. Now mind you, remember the Zohar, after it was written in manuscript form, because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived close to 2,000 years ago, those manuscripts were passed on, but they were hidden. And very few people in each generation had access to them. They were discovered in a cave in two places, in Cremona and Mantoba, Italy. Almost the same period of time, in two caves, manuscripts were discovered. At the time, no one understood what those were. They were in the 15th century they were discovered. Until they showed them to certain Torah scholars. Not all the Torah scholars either knew what it was, but a few, the big ones, really knew, because their teachers had passed on these secrets to them. And when they saw it, one of them exclaimed, he says, he couldn't believe this is the Zohar. The famous Zohar that everyone knew of, but they didn't really have the text. So the Zohar actually was discovered, and then that's when it was published in different versions, different editions. Now, so Rabbi Shimon, to a circle of disciples, is closely guarded secrets. Now, there's another interesting factor in this opening Zohar, which I want to point out, and there's a mysterious man involved that the Zohar only refers to as the Saba. Saba means old man, or in Hebrew today we say Saba means grandfather. But the word Saba really means old man. Actually, in this case, Okay, in this case, we're talking about a man who's actually described as a donkey driver. And I'll read to you something very interesting soon about how he's misunderstood. And he becomes part of revealing this whole process. So it's called Saba de Mishpatim, actually. It's called the Old Man of Mishpatim. This is chapter Mishpatim, the Old Man of Mishpatim, who reveals a big part of these mysteries of the reincarnation, of the cycles, the soul cycles. And he has a dialogue with Rav Shimon bar Yochai. As Rav Shimon bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the great mystic, reveals these ideas, this Saba, this older man, questions him, and it elicits different reactions. And then later, this Saba poses to some of the sages cryptic riddles that is misunderstood by one sage, but another sage understands the depth of some of these riddles. And I'll read one to you right now. And I'll just read to you. This is from the Zohar. I continue. I usually don't really go through text, but I hope I'm not boring anybody. I hope this is interesting. Okay. So here we go. One night, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yesi, this is from a little later in the same Zohar that I'm referring to. These are two great sages, arrived simultaneously to a city called Migdal Tzur. They both planned to lodge the night there and were delighted to see each other. This is the Zohar writing. Rabbi Yesi said, "You don't know how happy I am to behold the countenance of the Shekhinah. You don't know how happy I am to see you." Because he saw him, he's a tzaddik, he saw a righteous person, he saw a divine glow on his face. Okay. Why am I happy to see you? For while I was traveling, I was bothered by this old man, a donkey driver, who plied me with questions the entire way. And he begins to repeat some of these questions. The first question he asked me was, what is the snake that flies through the air and goes about all alone with an ant resting between its teeth? He began with union and ended with separation. That was the first. And then he asked me, and what is the eagle that makes her nest in a tree that never was? Her children were stolen away, but not as created beings, for they were created in a place where there is no creation. When they ascend, they descend, and when they descend, they ascend. Two are one, and one is three. It's all clear, right? Okay. And then he finally says the third question. Who is the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, who comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, who's adorned with ornaments that never were? So let me just, before we get further into this, all these questions he asked me on the way, and it distressed me. This is all Rabbi Chia telling Rabbi Yesi. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yesi saying to Rabbi Chia, that's how I'm happy to see you, because I was pestered by this donkey driver with these ridiculous questions in his mind. It distressed me, but now I can relax. Had we been together, we would have occupied ourselves with Torah discussions instead of other nonsensical matters. That's how I dismissed what this old donkey driver had to say. Remember, a donkey driver is basically equivalent of a cab driver, because that's how you moved around. You rode on a donkey. Okay, Rabbi Chia asked this old man, do you know anything about him? That's his response. He replied, this I know, his chatter is worthless. For had he known anything, that he would have been discussing Torah, and the journey would not have been wasted. Okay? So the lesson immediately is next time you're in a cab and you start hearing stuff like this, you never know what he's really revealing. Rabbi Chia said, is the donkey driver here? Sometimes those apparently empty-headed fellows can turn out to be a golden bell. Here he is preparing for his food for his donkey. They called him over and he came before them. He said to them, now 2 are 3 and 3 are as 1. But Rabbi Yesi still did not grasp the true nature of the old man's comments, and he said to Rabbi Chia, didn't I tell you that all his words are meaningless and idle chatter? The old man sat down before them and said, Rabbis, only recently I became a donkey driver. I was not always a donkey driver. But I have one young son whom I sent to school, and I want him to occupy himself with Torah, and so when I meet a rabbi in my travels, I try to act as his donkey driver. Today I thought I would hear some novel Torah insights, but I heard nothing. Anyway, it goes on to basically describe, I'll read one more, let's see here. So it says like this, Rabbi Yesi said, of all the things I heard you say, only one of them surprised me. You either said it out of foolishness or because you did not know what you were talking about. And what was that? Asked the old man. About the beautiful maiden, etc. The old man began. The Lord is with me, I do not fear. What can man do to me? I am not afraid to reveal the secrets of the Torah. Anyway, and then the old man continues and concludes and says, as a result, I'm not able to judge whether these men are indeed worthy of learning secrets of the Torah. Then it goes on how the Rabbi, and Rabbi reveals how this old man is actually a tremendous mystic, and through his riddles, as is usually the case, which he provoked and was attempting to reveal secrets. So why not say them straight out? Why say them in form of riddles? And you find in other disciplines of mysticism, you'll find the same thing, that masters, teachers, will challenge their students with the cryptic statements. You can say, why can't you just tell it to me the way it is? Because as I said earlier, it's not about the truth and the information, it's about the humble experiencing to receive it. You're not a receptacle and a container for wisdom until you're humble, or else you will not be able to ever really master it. So you have to let go. And the riddles are meant to essentially challenge you. Because if it was just said to you, okay, here's the information, one, you may not appreciate it. Two, you wouldn't necessarily get the depth. The depth is hidden and concealed in a riddle. And these riddles force us to think. And then when we see the response and explanation of the riddle, and I'll explain some of them, you recognize the depth of the meaning behind it all. So let's take the one where he spoke about the maiden. What did he mean by that? Okay? So, this is how the commentaries explain. That the maiden, I'll just read it again, right? Remember, there's the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, who comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, who is adorned with ornaments that never were. He's referring to the soul and his journey. The pure and unsullied neshama is the maiden that has merited to go to paradise as a result of its good deeds. And that's why it's a beautiful maiden. Why is it without eyes? So it's not the maiden who's without eyes, it's we're without eyes. Because you can't see a neshama. You can't see a soul. So if you read it closely, especially in the Aramaic, without eyes, we cannot see a soul. However, the soul, you could also interpret that even on the level of spirituality, you don't need eyes to see it. Because eyes are necessary to see a material existence. Spirituality, eyes do not help seeing the soul or spirit. However, the soul does manifest in this world, we call it clothed in garments. And this level is concealed. What was the expression he used? He says that this maiden, is what he says like this. Oh, where is it? His body is concealed and revealed. Because once the soul dresses up in a garment, it's concealed because, as I said, we can't see it, but it's revealed because it is now at least in the form of a garment. I'll explain this in a moment. It comes out in the morning because after midnight, toward morning, God descends and all the souls of tzaddikim from the upper dimension are revealed. So that's why he says that, last statement says that it comes out in the morning and disappears during the day. Who is adorned with ornaments that never were. The ornaments that never were is because the soul has ornaments, but they're not defined by anything that we in the material world can ever appreciate. So let me explain this in simple English, if I may, okay? The general gist of the Zohar and the relevance to us is the following. The Zohar talks about generally two types of souls. There are souls who come down and remain throughout their lifetimes, called tzaddikim. They do not sin. They have no blemish. And they fulfill their lives, they fulfill the mission for which they were sent here in an untarnished way. They too have a journey, and that journey continues, but it's one type of soul. The other type of soul, which is really more relevant to all of us, is the soul that goes through the wear and tear of life, and we make our share of mistakes, and are blemished. And these two souls are part of a long journey, which is why the whole idea is called cycles, Gilgulim. What's a cycle? A cycle means that it's a process. We have to train ourselves into seeing life not as fragmented, disjointed pieces, but there's a cycle to everything in life. Everything is a cycle. We humans, due to our own limited vision, our own laziness, look at things in moments. We see them as particles, when in truth there's a cycle to it all. You look at nature, you see the cycle. Trees, in their own consciousness, surely know that when the winter comes, they shed their leaves, and then they prepare for the cold winter. They go into a form of hibernation. Same with different animals. And then comes the other seasons, which are all part of the cycle when the tree will bloom. And you'll study a tree, you'll see it will always do this. We humans, we get caught up in our moments, and we don't recognize the cycle. Children are different, young children. But as adults, that's what happens. When in truth, if you think about it, you're watching a film. We all know films are made of frames, but there's a story. The frames are just parts of a big picture. It's harder for us to look at things that way, especially in our fast food generation, where everything is like, I want it and I want it now. Quick. You need patience for a process. A seed you cannot speed up the process. You plant the seed, it's going to take always the same amount of time for it to grow. You could pour as much water as you like in it. You could do whatever we could do. You could coax it. It's not going to grow faster. And the same thing in everything in nature. We human beings, I would argue that it's also a result of our own insecurities and fears and stuff. We are terrified of losing something. So we lose sight of the process. We lose sight of the cycle. So the first lesson in all reincarnation is the idea that life is a cycle. And yes, your soul is part of a process that began long, long ago. And souls before us, think of it like one long marathon. That is history. And each generation, and each person in each generation, carries the baton for a period of time in this one long marathon. And we are an extension of those that came before us, and preparation for those after us. But what we have to contribute is indispensable. So therefore, the soul's journey is a very sacred journey, and a dignified one, and a critical one, because all of life, all of history, all of existence hangs in the balance. You don't fulfill your little piece in your period of time, in this process, the whole picture is compromised. Which is the reason why we have reincarnation in the first place. Cycles is what I prefer to call it. Because you can call it the spiritual immunity system. That in case a soul comes down to earth and doesn't fulfill everything it had to fulfill, or made a mistake and caused damage, and it leaves this earth, it dies before it could repair and fulfill what it had to fulfill, there is an immunity system. It's not all lost. That soul will return again to repair what it has to repair. And it will do so many times. Which is why, when you look at your life is absolutely self-contained. It's your life. You're not just some type of accessory to previous souls. You are a critical component in this whole journey. Because the part that you have to live, your entire life, you must fulfill. And you're fulfilling something that may have not been fulfilled in a previous lifetime. So that's the story with most of our souls. But then there's another soul called the maiden. There's the soul sometimes called here as the only daughter of the king's only daughter. Bas Yechid or Bas Melech, referred to in the Zohar. This is a soul that is unblemished. This is a soul of a tzaddik or a tzidkanis. As a matter of fact, some commentaries say it's actually referring to women's souls who have a different type of certain order when it comes to cycles and reincarnation. But this is in Hasidic and in Kabbalistic language. You've heard me speak about Malchus. So you have the 9 spheres: Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayd, Yisod. And then you have Malchus. In simple English, again, Malchus is dignity. Malchus is the level of the soul that is unblemished. So why does it come down to this earth? It comes down to this earth sometimes to lead, sometimes to be a role model and an example, to help us, let's call it, the more pedestrian souls. I don't like to use that word because every soul is profound and so on, but I mean those souls that are related more to the material part of this universe. They help us to pick ourselves up. These are people who are mentors, our leaders, and so on. That's what a tzaddik. This soul too, however, also has cycles. This soul may return to achieve a purpose, exactly this type of person, leadership purpose. And this soul too has to engage with the material world. So we all have our function. And the critical thing to understand is that that to appreciate your own soul's purpose and the soul's mission, you have to be sensitive to the soul. Which is why this old man, the donkey driver, who masqueraded as a donkey driver and seemed like a simple man, or he called even saying, uttering nonsense, essentially really challenged two sages and one sage in this world to think deeper and to look deeper into existence. Because we are so trapped and so seduced by the material tentacles of this world that it's critical to challenge that perception. So that's why he said to him all these paradoxes that I was reading before from the Zohar, where he says, the three different riddles. To read it again, the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, comes in the morning and disappears, adorned with ornaments that never wore. You see one common denominator. It's full of paradoxes. And when you read this sentence, it makes you think it doesn't make sense. Beautiful maiden without eyes. Beauty, immediately you think of I see beauty, and now why is it without eyes? Something is concealed is the opposite of being revealed. Something that comes out does not disappear. Something that's adorned is with something that never wore. And the same is true with the other references that he made. I'm just going back to the other one. Let me just get it here. A lot of pages I have here. He says this. He says the snake that flies through the air and goes about all alone began with a union and ended with separation. And then the second riddle: the eagle, makes a nest in a tree that never was. Children stolen, but not as created beings. They were created in a place there is no creation. They ascend when they descend, and they descend when they ascend. Two are one, and one is three. So, more specifically, when you talk about this, you're also addressing people's lives as far as our relationships go. We all know the concept of a soulmate. A soulmate is a person that literally means a soulmate. The Torah says, the Bible in the beginning says that every soul comes down to this, that in the beginning God created Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve were two parts of one entity, and then he separated them. And that's why we are attracted to each other. That's the secret behind human sexual attraction. Because it's two parts of one soul, looking to reunite, to rejoin. When a person does not rejoin with their soulmate, the soul has some anguish over it, which is the anguish of not finding your bashert, as they say, not finding the one that's meant for you. And this immediately refers us to what the souls were like before they came to this place. Were these souls connected before they came to earth? Absolutely. And this is also what this old man is referring to in these paradoxes. He's talking about, you see here, the children, the nest. He's talking about people who are searching for their soulmate. And in that process are not finding it because primarily because they're not looking for the soul, they're looking for the body. So, in the focus of this message, it's essentially saying these paradoxes. The paradox ultimately is this: what matters most in life are the things, as I said before, that are invisible. Yet what we value most initially are the things that are absolutely visible. And that's why he uses all these paradoxes to be able to help and provoke, to challenge us. So when you say something, you can see it, but you can't see it. It goes up and it goes down. Immediately says there's nothing like that in existence. That's absolutely true. Nothing like that in material existence. In spiritual existence, it's absolutely the case. Ask any married couple, and they'll tell you marriage is a paradox. Actually, they'll identify more with these riddles than with so-called rational prose. What's a paradox? As soon as you have two people who have different attitudes, different backgrounds, strangers, come together, and in a healthy marriage, if it's unhealthy, God forbid, or they break up, then of course, then it didn't work. But in a healthy marriage, it's a miracle, and that's why the Talmud says that it's as difficult to find a match, almost as difficult as parting the sea, because it's like bringing together sea and land. Men and women have very fundamental differences. They need each other, but like the expression goes, you can't live with him, you can't live without him. You can't live with her, you can't live without her. So we need relationships, but they're not easy. They take work. Especially, as I said, in a relationship that's not neglected, that is dynamic, that's growing, work is being invested all the time. Because you have two people who are two adults, and they both treat each other as equals. They each have individuality. So without compromising someone's individuality, how could two individuals, who let's say are fierce, independent souls, come together? That definitely requires some type of, that definitely contains some mystique, some mystery. For that matter, human beings in general are mysteries. Betty Friedan wrote the book, The Feminine Mystique. But just for the record, I must tell you, there's also a masculine mystique. Maybe the feminine mystique was underappreciated, with men running the world and the hierarchy, male hierarchy. But regardless, human beings have mystique. And part of a healthy relationship is embracing that mystique. So what this old man, the donkey driver, is doing is challenging, in the most simplistic way, almost like nonsensical riddles, to rethink what life really is about. Is life a paradox, or does life make sense? Albert Einstein, of all people, who you would think, a person who made so much sense of the universe, who understood secrets and mystery of the universe more than anyone, perhaps more than anyone in history on a scientific level, said the following. He said the most, what's the word he used? The most unreasonable part of the universe existence is that it's reasonable. That's what he said. What does this mean? It means that if you really understand existence, you understand nature, science, you can't in any way capture why is it reasonable. You know how many factors you need for things to make sense? It would seem much more logical. It shouldn't make sense. Now I know that doesn't make sense to us because we worship the mind. But this is what he said. The most unreasonable part of existence is that it's reasonable, that it can make sense. Now, Einstein, was discovering God's mind in his way. In the Torah and in Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought, the answer is very simple. God wanted it to make sense. That's why it makes sense. He created it in a way. They created intelligent human beings in order for them to understand the intelligence invested in existence. It could have been done in an unintelligent way. Now, if you really think about it, it all does make sense, but also doesn't make sense. For example, you can Google this, check it out. I think it's the bumblebee, or at least some bee or some flying insect, that according to all laws of aerodynamics, that insect should never fly. Its body weight, compared to the flutter and the air pockets, it shouldn't fly. However, as the scientists like to say, the bumblebee never asked scientists whether it should fly or not, and never studied science. If it studied science, it would never fly, because it never would make sense. So a lot of nature that makes sense to us, remember, it makes sense once we see it. And once we understand it, you start realizing there's a wisdom to it all. So the point here is not to suggest there's no reason, but to suggest that reason itself is not necessarily reasonable. The logic itself, if you get to the axioms of what defines logic, is not necessarily logical. That's the way it is. And scientists have a consensus, which is no proof for it, that you always search for the simplest solution to any scientific problem. Ask or read up. There's no proof for that. Maybe it's not the most simple solution. Maybe it's the most complex solution. Maybe something in between. Maybe some have simple solutions, some complex. That's the consensus. It's not provable, but it's accepted by all, that the simplest approach is the one that you look for. And it's never been disproven. So you could always argue, well, maybe there are other explanations. There may be. But the simplest one has always been that consensus. The point I'm making here is that the appreciation of existence and life, and that's essentially what this old man is doing, is challenging the perception of what is up and what is down, and what is valuable and what is precious and what is not, and what is ascending and what is descending, and what is beauty and what is not, and what do we see and what don't we see. And if you don't challenge yourself in this way, you really can never understand your soul and your soul's journey and the soulmates and relationships that you have. So let me give you an example of two scenarios. Very simple scenarios that we all have every day. Tonight, tomorrow, today, but today has passed already, but tomorrow, you'll have certain encounters. You may commute, you'll be in the office, you may be traveling somewhere, whatever it is. You may be taking a walk, you may be going for a coffee, meeting someone for dinner. It doesn't have to be necessarily an interaction with another person, but we'll have many encounters. Some encounters with nature, some encounters with people, some encounters with experiences. Of course, online, there's plenty of encounters, depending how many hours you spend at whatever website, that's Facebook or the others. How do you look at these encounters? Most of us never give it much thought about a bigger picture. These encounters, whatever comes. I'll have different encounters. I'll deal with it as it comes. You may have an appointment tomorrow that you're looking forward to or not looking forward to. You may have certain obligations, expectations, etc. But generally speaking, most encounters, they come your way. That's essentially a person who's traveling on a material journey, and once in a while something emerges. You may meet somebody unexpected, and you'll hear something. You meet someone that really surprises you. But this is not necessarily in our control. What happens, happens. If it's a negative experience, okay, you try to run, what do you call it? You try to go with the punches. Is that the expression? If it's something positive, great. But there's another way of looking at your life experiences. That whatever's going to happen has an underlying script, forces at work that are making that happen. What you do with it is up to you. But every encounter, there's no such thing as just an encounter. That encounter is a spiritual experience waiting to be released, waiting to be actualized. So you may meet somebody who will speak nonsense to you, for example, in this, and you'll just dismiss it. That doesn't mean everyone who speaks nonsense is not speaking nonsense, by the way. But it doesn't mean everyone speaking nonsense is speaking nonsense. Maybe he has something to say to you. Maybe there's a message coming to you. Maybe it's a message that you need to listen to. That's a different way of looking at things. And that's a critical tool to changing your life and improving your life. So if a person's in a rut and says, I've been dating, I can't find my soulmate. At some point you have to ask yourself, if you're honest and want to really get anywhere, if I keep doing what I keep doing, I'm going to keep having the same results. Right? That's what they define insanity, as being someone who does the same thing and expecting different results. So how do you change what you're doing? That doesn't just mean changing what street you walk down. It means fundamentally looking at things differently. What are we looking for when we talk about finding a soulmate? What are we looking for? So we have our standard shopping list. Someone that I found attractive, someone that is chemistry, there's an emotional attraction, can have a conversation, and so on. It's all very nice, but who trained you exactly how to look for a soulmate? Where did you pick up your standards? Well, mostly by osmosis, by things we saw, by things that we keep seeing, what our eyes see, and so on. But what is true beauty? I'm not suggesting a person shouldn't be drawn to someone and want to be drawn to someone that is physically attractive. But how much of that is overshadowing other types of beauty? And what happens if you find that someone can be physically attracted and maybe 10 years from now they may not be so physically attracted? But that person and you can both build something together that will change the universe and generations to come? How many of us think like that? We're not trained to think like that. We don't live in a world that thinks 10 years ahead. Most people say 10 years ahead, most marriages fail. That's, if anything, you think about a prenuptial, what to do, exit strategy. We don't think like that. And the media doesn't support that type of thinking. So, though what we're looking for may be correct on the list, they're all good things, but they're not necessarily the whole picture. So that doesn't matter so much if it's a small thing, which coffee you're going to drink in the morning. But if you're talking about finding a soulmate, an eternal partner in life, you're talking about something serious. You have to really start thinking like a soul thinks. And you need to be provoked. What you consider to be valuable, what you consider to be beautiful. That's not so easy. None of us want to be challenged about our preconceptions, especially in the areas of our emotions. It's one thing, challenge me, I'm going to take a riddle, a quiz for my IQ. There I want to be challenged. But challenge emotionally people don't like to take emotional tests so quickly. You do that when you have no choice, or you do that if you know for sure you're going to have good results. But it's very, very disconcerting to find out that you may be blind about many things and that your emotions are somewhat, let's call it screwed up, is the right word, and so on. So here you have an old man, a donkey driver, that almost would have been completely misunderstood by a great sage. But the other one reminded him, and he challenged him. And in each of these phrases, and again, I'm speaking about it more in a palatable and accessible language. It's more complicated when you read in the Zohar because he talks more details about the different type of souls, and that's what each riddle refers to, another dimension of how souls migrate, the cycles. But the bottom line, above all, is forcing one to think in other type of language and terms. And yes, that's what you want. If your life is working, you definitely want to be challenged to grow even further than you are. And if your life isn't working completely in some areas, even more so you want to be challenged. You want your perceptions to be challenged because you want to be able to say, okay, so how should I look at it? And how should I perceive things? Now, trust me, it's not easy. It's very difficult. But it's a matter of life and death in a way. I'm talking about spiritually speaking. It's about living up to who you can be or not doing so. So, in this context, every one of our souls, therefore, is part of this long journey. But the key thing to remember is that when someone asks the question, okay, so what previous life may I have been? See, as soon as you ask that question, we all are intrigued by that. Most of us are never going to find an answer to that question. And if somebody does give you an answer, especially if they charge you money, you probably know that's not not accurate answer. See, because if we had to know which soul we were in past history, we would be told. The fact that we're not told, but we're told that we're part of a journey, preserves the mystique, preserves the integrity. And embracing the mystique of something is one of the hardest things to do in our so-called, as I said, commodity-driven, acquisition-oriented society. Embracing a mystique means embracing something that's beyond me. And when you do so, you begin to relate to it. And I mentioned before, truth, love, relationships are all part of that journey. So, to continue on there, I want to go back to the thing with the two types of souls. So, each of us are born into this world. Your soul is pure. We say it in the morning. We say every morning, Neshama shenasata bi tahirihi. The soul that I have, that you have given me, is pure. Each of us says it. No matter what happened in your life, that soul is pure. And, of course, upon birth, freshly fallen snow is the purest of them all. Before life soils, before we go through the experiences, before losses, disappointments, broken promises, dashed dreams. So a soul has two parts to it, in other words. It always has its purity, that it transcends, in a sense, our life experiences. and even our disappointments and the negative experiences in our lives. And then we have the soul as it manifests in the areas of our lives that are affected by life. So just take any particular example. Let's say you had some type of negative experience a year ago, 2 years ago. Hopefully not more often than that. So to look back at it, at the moment it's harder to see. When you're in a difficult moment, it's harder to see the big picture because you're completely consumed, overwhelmed by the emotions of the moment. But when time passes, a few things can happen. Obviously, you can remain bitter and angry about that. You could forget about it and just become neutral. Or you could remember it, but you learn from it and you've grown through it. All those three options are possible. So it's critical to know the two components that I just said. That number one is that the soul always remains above whatever you've experienced. So your real you, the real identity, your real soul, the inner dimension of your soul, is never really called tarnished by your life experiences. But that's the soul so-called on your inner level. Life experiences, however, can affect your consciousness, your mannerisms, your behaviors, your tools, your body language, and so on. So that too is part of the experience, that the soul has to manifest in that part of the experience. And it manifests, as we know, the soul has 5 levels, as he discusses in the Zohar. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. 5 dimensions. Nefesh refers to biological life. That's the soul as it manifests in real life. So that soul is impacted by life experiences. The level of ruach is the emotional life of the soul. That's a little detached. It's an emotional life, but it's a little above the nefesh level, biological level. The next level is, I can't say a little detached, I wouldn't say the word detached, it's a little more transcendent. The next level is neshama, is the intellectual life of the soul. The next is the transcendent level, chaya. And finally the 5th is yechida, the pure, the essence, the oneness of the soul. So, the soul as it manifests in the lower levels means it has to manifest in this world and it will be affected by it. So when a life experience happens, what happens is 2 things can come to, if it's at its best, if you're at your best, you access the deeper part of the soul that's untarnished to help you transcend the difficult experience. And then the soul part that is experiencing the difficult experience, you learn to transform that into a positive one. Someone that remains bitter, it's usually as a result because the experience has taken control of your life. That means it's not just what you experienced, you became it. Like you could have a person who suffered, and you have a sufferer. It's not the same thing. Many of us, all of us in life are going to go through have some setbacks. But do you become defined? Does your identity become defined by your setbacks and by your negative experience? That's the difference between whether your soul's in control or not. So, life has its challenges. As I often mention, a good swimmer is not someone that is always swimming and is so powerful that can swim against the tide or when a storm strikes. What does a good swimmer do? That when the tide is against him or her and there's a storm, he will stop swimming. He'll stop exerting energy and just save his energy and he'll let himself float go with the waves. A bad swimmer or someone who's not experienced is going to fight and get exhausted. So when we experience anything in life, if everything's working well, the higher part of the soul reminds you that you have more to life than just what's happening right now. The lower part of the soul goes through the experience, and the higher part informs the lower to learn from this experience. And then a year later, or a time later, you can realize this experience has been a necessary process in my own growth. That's to give you an example. So essentially we have these 2 forces at work, these 2 dimensions of the soul all the time at work. And when we do that, the Zohar says, God himself illuminates us with many radiates us with many lights. Which means when a person is able to access that higher part and connect it to their lower part, they in turn get a blessing that gives them the strength to deal with things. Now, implementing this, of course, is easier said than done, but there are methods, there are ways how to do this. I think I've given examples for this in the past, but I'll just give one or two examples. The Hasidic expression, when you're tied above, you don't fall below. Which means, when you're grounded and you are connected to something that is a type of strong foundation, so that maintains you when things are challenging. I mentioned it last week, we spoke about trees. When the roots are deeply embedded, or in this case I said tied above, actually in Kabbalah it says the roots, the foundation on earth, the foundation is beneath the building. In heaven, the foundation is above the building, because it works from the top down. So the foundation begins Keser, the crown is the foundation, and then it develops into Chachma Bina, into the spherotic structure. So when you're bound above, you don't fall below, means that when you have in your life spiritual commitments, you need to go to a class once a week. You have a partner that you study with, or you go and volunteer. Things that are more powerful than your daily routines. Those things can help and save your life in times of need. So when things are going well, like I said last week, a tree, there's no storm going on. The tree's standing and you can't tell the difference between one tree and the next. But in a time of a storm, when there's a challenge, those forces that you introduce into your life, those roots tied above, allows you to ride through the storm. I've said this I've suggested this exercise, plan to quite a number of couples that I was involved and blessed with to be able to either marry off or be part of their marriage. When they come to talking to me, counseling before they get married, I always suggest, the way you start things, that's the way they're going to go. You implement some things at the beginning, it'll always be that way. If you don't do it in the beginning, later it's going to be hard to change your habits. So my suggestion, I always say, is no matter what, both of you make time once a week to study together. An hour Thursday evening, whatever. Make a time, but do it before you get married. Do it right away. Commit to it. Once a month in your home, host something. And I always explain the reason for it is because marriage is going to go through its roller coaster. That's how it is. The more roots you embed into your relationship, the more things that connect you, that transcend your differences, they will withstand some of these challenges. So in times when other things may not be working, this may rise to be able to be like a type of safety net. And I can tell you at least 4 or 5 couples that I personally know told me that the result of doing this saved their marriage. Because when it came to the crisis, a disagreement, something happened or whatever, and they stuck to their commitment, they stuck to it, that itself diffused it. That doesn't mean it just solves all the problems automatically, but it meant that they, essentially what we say in investments, diversified. They diversified. They didn't put all their eggs in one basket. I'm angry, we're not going out to dinner. I'm angry, we're not going to study this week. Why should the study be compromised because we're angry at each other? So things like that can end up holding up a relationship. Obviously, it's not alone, it's not sufficient all on its own, but if you think of it in terms of a formula, it works. And try it out even in your own life. This is, I mentioned relationships. Introduce things into your life that are eternal, soulful, commit to them, stick to them, and do it in a way. Don't bite off more than you can chew, or else you won't stay committed. It's the small, consistent commitments. Every day a penny in the charity box. Every day a prayer, a little study. Whatever the schedule, however you work it out. But do it consistently, and do it precisely not because you need it for work, or you need it for some deadline, or to satisfy someone. Do it simply for your soul. Because as soon as you're doing it for some reason, okay, then that the reason is really the dominating factor, and when that reason is gone, you'll stop. Do it for the soul's benefit, for your own soul's benefit. You'll see that it'll come back to repay you many times over. So in simple terms, you can say that this Parsha Mishpatim, these are the laws. These are the ordinances. These are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. Well, God is telling Moses essentially, these are the cycles of a soul's journey. And every soul will go through its challenges. But every challenge is meant to bring a person to a greater place. Then there's the part of the soul, or there are those tzaddikim souls. Each one of us has a dimension of that within ourselves. Amach kulam tzaddikim. We all have the Moses within us, etc. The Malchus. That the maiden that has an element that is above the challenges of our lives. And these two have to learn how to speak to each other. In psychological terminology, they have today the terms, the inner child. And there are many disciplines, many therapies based on reconnecting to your inner child. If you really translate that, that's really the words of the inner child is the queen's is the only child of the queen, the princess, the maiden, that is the only child of the king, Bas Melech, Bas Yechida, the only child, the princess. This is an inner child that each one of us has that is untarnished by life's experiences. Yet, there's another dimension of the soul that does manifest itself in life. Nefesh and so on. And as a result, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, that does manifest itself in this material world. And there needs to be, you have to always know that you're always a princess, you're always a queen, always a flower, a musical note, no matter what happens in life. And to know it is one thing, and act on it. So by doing things that speak, that nourish that dimension of your soul, of Chai Yechidim, that can hold you and can help you, can save you in times when the other parts of the soul fall. So it's like when a person falls, how do you pick yourself up? When you have something inside of you that's stronger, that pushes you to pick yourself up. You don't sink. You dig deeper. And these are things that we build in times of plenty. When things are going well, that's when you build those reinforcements, those reservoirs, because then they're part of your arsenal. And when there's a challenge in life, you have something to lean back on. You have something to turn to. I know people, unfortunately, they put all their eggs in one basket. Whether it was making a lot of money, and then after I make a lot of money, then I'll go build a family, a home, and so on. And then when something happened there and they lost, they had nothing to turn to. There was no safety net. There's nothing to turn to. Not just they lost their money, there's not another investment. There was not, at least you go home at night, there's children, there's a family that cares for you and stuff like that. These things are critical. Now, this doesn't mean you have to prepare for the worst. It just means being prudent and intelligent. And frankly, even if one never falls, everything I'm saying is also extremely relevant. Because as they say in Yiddish, if good is besser, nicht besser. If good is better, not better. So even if things are going very well, human beings like to grow. Growth means going further. So this is not just about preventive medicine of avoiding problems. It's also how we can actualize ourselves and push ourselves to reach greater heights. So it comes down to this. Maybe tomorrow or tonight, when you open your eyes, think of what this donkey driver said. Eyes, but you don't see. Or the beauty, but without eyes. So you think about it. Look inside yourself, or look inside another human being. You say, hey, this is a beautiful soul. A beautiful soul. But you cannot see a beautiful soul. So what is exactly experiencing it? And what do you see? We see many things around us. Sometimes very, awesome, magnificent beauty. But it's also important to look for the beautiful souls in our lives. The people that have beauty in them. And everybody has beauty in them. And when you look with such eyes, you'll find beauty you may not have seen another time without looking that way. It's changing how you look at things. You're recognizing if there's beauty in everything, you'll look for it differently. There was a custom in certain armies that before they went to war, they marched out to the first battle, they would sing a march of victory, a victory march. And the question is asked, you haven't even fought one battle. What kind of cockiness is that? You think the answer is, it's the confidence. You'll see this before a game. You see it before a real battle. That the leader will give everybody a pep talk and hype them up. It's to elicit the energy, the confidence, the strength. Because confidence is half the battle. You lose confidence, all your competence is worthless. So you can make a bumper sticker out of that, Jeff. Okay, competence without confidence equals incompetence. Okay, so how much is confidence? How much is competence? It's a good question. It's like they asked that guy who made a lot of money. He said, how much of it is seichel? How much of it is mazel? How much of intelligence? How much luck? He said, let's put it this way. It's 95% luck, 5% intelligence. And if it was 100% luck, I'd be a lot wealthier. You know? So, competence and confidence is something like, I don't know if it's exact quite proportion, ratio. Excuse me. But essentially, it's like this. Confidence, you can see, the greatest people with great talents, they lose confidence, you can beat them. I remember when I was a camper in camp, so I played chess, I can't say I was some big master. But there was a guy in camp that was extremely good. He was young, but he was a genius. He was a brilliant chess player. And I beat him, not because I'm better than him, because I psyched him out. And I don't remember what I did exactly, but I definitely told him. So he was reading into my moves some type of depth that wasn't there, and he made a mistake. So it's about sometimes. Well, there was a little deception, I would say. Please don't report that to the authorities. But generally speaking, confidence is a critical component because confidence breeds confidence. People respond to confidence. So going out with that march of victory is that when you know absolutely that your soul has beauty in it, when you know that people you meet and every experience has some beauty in there, you look at life a different way. And this is what this donkey driver of all people challenged them, how to look at things. Look differently. You want to understand the soul's journey, the soul's cycles? Look differently. Do you think that people who really can perceive and discern the previous lives of a soul's journey are just simply smarter people or prophets? No. They're humbler people. And they have so, what word I want to use? Unwrapped. They're so, I want to say like declothed themselves. They've so, there's a word I'm looking for in English. It's like, so freed themselves from all the garments and from all the traps of our own sensory perceptions that they're able to, ultimately, what emerges is the spiritual experience. And you can sense a soul and a soul's journey in a different fashion. So it's about really getting rid of, eliminating all those, like cleansing the doors of perception in Blake's terms. Say disrobing the garments of perception. Yeah. And once that's really what it's about. So we may not be able to achieve quite that type of effort of that type of this whatever word I want to use, but a taste of it, all of us is possible for all of us. And when you and when you assume that attitude, you look at everything differently. You look at life differently, and new surprising ways. You start seeing opportunities where once you may have disregarded it or seen it as a liability or a challenge. There's opportunities everywhere, but you have that confidence in the soul's inner mission, the soul's transcendent power, the ability for it to not be affected and definitely not trapped and defined by life's experiences. Jews throughout history suffered, but they never became sufferers. As I mentioned before, we can have an experience that doesn't mean you have to become the experience. If it's a good experience, by all means become it, but we are not a product of our experiences. We're not a victim of circumstances. We are souls on a journey in the material world, and as souls we shall always remain. The only question is, how aware are you of it? How much do you actualize it? How much do you implement of that soul's power into your outer garments? And when you're able to do it, the more you do it by committing yourself to things of that nature, the more it emerges. Simple example, you help somebody, you offer help, people come speak to you and they consult with you, and you give them share something with them, that makes you see things clearer. You start empathizing differently. You start sensing, you're more sensitive to people's needs and interests. Obviously, we all begin the morning with what's called the self-centered life, self-absorbed. Your interests, my interests, whatever they are, and other people fit in if they add to my needs. So if you're ready to give me something, I'll give you something in return. That's nice transactional life, but it's not the way soul functions. That's the way a body functions. The soul doesn't think in those terms. The same body that does not relate to cryptic riddles also doesn't relate to giving, because all it knows about is taking. It's a hoarder. It hoards. Because the material existence is a very insecure one, and if you don't hold on to it, material consciousness states you may disappear. Spirituality doesn't have that problem because it doesn't occupy time and space, so it's fine with it if it disappears. Like he says here, it can be seen and disappear. It disappears, the fact that you don't see it with the naked eye. You think DNA or subatomic particles really care whether you see them or not. They know, they shape all of existence. That's the bottom line. So you see how a certain reality doesn't really takes very seriously our limited myopic vision of what we consider to be valuable or precious or beautiful. Obviously, we don't live on a DNA level. We live on an outer level, but we can create a channel that connects that inner life with our outer life, and that's through technically that's what a mitzvah is about. So Elam Mishpatim, these are the judgments that you shall arrange. Also means these are the laws, these are the mitzvahs. So mitzvah means connection. For the cycle of the soul to really continue its journey, it's through connecting. So there's a connection between the literal interpretation of this verse and also the fact that it talks about the laws that govern the soul's journey. Is because if you want to master that soul's journey, you have to fulfill the mishpatim in a technical sense. Because that's what a mitzvah is about. A mitzvah is a physical act that has that is like a switch that creates a spiritual connection. It generates a spiritual connection, just like a switch. But you cannot turn on a light without a physical switch, because we don't live on the level of light. So for there to be a bridge between the two worlds, you need to have a physical switch that creates a connection that in turn generates light. The same is our commitments, the things we do, our mishpatim, the things we do. You make that connection between the material and the spiritual, then the spiritual is nourished, the spiritual radiates like light, and then the spiritual feeds you back in turn, and you feed its cycle and appreciate its role in our lives. So is it easy to envision or to imagine tomorrow morning thinking of yourself in a new way? When you wake up, you say, Moda'ani, I acknowledge you for returning my soul. But instead of thinking now, you know what, here's what I have to do with my body. I have to take a shower, I have to eat and so on. Yeah, do all that. But think of it like this. Your soul is really the driving force, but your body has certain needs. So the soul is saying, okay, let's go take a shower for you. I'm going to take care of you now. Let's feed you. Let's do this, let's that. In other words, try thinking for a moment how the soul, from the soul's perspective, not from your sensations or what your needs are or what you feel. What is the soul thinking? Try that exercise. You'll see it's not going to be easy, but if you could do it for a minute or two, it's a quite fascinating experience. It's like closing your eyes, and many exercises are with breathing. Yeah, breathe from within, and what you feel is the soul force is really where it all begins. But we live on the outside level, so we can only travel from the outside in. The truth is, the perception of the soul is from the inside out. Now, a tzaddik sees everything from the inside out. We see everything from the outside in. But that doesn't mean we can't have a glimpse, and at times climb the mountain and see from the outside in. From the inside out, through connecting to that which is above, which helps us not fall below. So, hopefully this was just a nice taste of the ordinances that govern our cycles, the judgment that arrange the soul's journeys. And we learned a little about a donkey driver and about an old man and the mysteries of that. And hopefully this will, above all, empower each of us to really look at ourselves, look at our lives differently. And especially, as I said, in the area of relationships. If you can realign, reprogram, maybe how you look at things, maybe that's the thing. First you have to deprogram, then you reprogram. So first you have to, erase your hard drive before you refill it. I can't say erase it at all, that may not be so good, but erase parts of how it works of the operating system, and upload some new software from the Zohar Parsha Mishpatim. I'm sure that it'll help us all find new solutions to old problems. So I'm honored to speak to all of you as your soul goes through its cycle and its journeys. Each of you in your own particular trajectory, your own way. And I want to say again that this class is dedicated to a soul of Rabbi Chaim Mushka, passed away 24 years ago, the yahrzeit of the father of Gary Salva, David Aaron Ben Yosef and Yeshua HaKohen, as well, 25 years ago, and birthday of our good friend Ron Agam. And may all our souls have healthy, many, many healthy years in their journey here on this earth, and above all, to live up to the potential of your soul, and make sure that its cycle is complete. You know, when you're running your leg of the marathon, you want to be the fastest you can be, the most efficient you can be. Obviously, this doesn't mean physically faster, because sometimes you have to go slowly in your journey, or else you miss, you will forget to smell the roses, as they say. And everyone should be blessed in finding their soulmate, those that need to find that, and to hold on to the soulmates that you have, and build beautiful families. And may we all be that beautiful maiden whose body is concealed and revealed, comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, adorned with ornaments that were never were. It's the combination of the ultimate paradox of the soul's metaphysical invisibility and bridging that with the sensory world, which is tangible and experienced in our senses. The bridging basically the suprasensory with the sensory. So, Philip will be giving his class Thursday, tomorrow night. Anyone interested, please call us. We are here in any way to satisfy and help and provide resources for your soul's journey in this material world. So it's a combination of soul and body. And it's an honor to share a few moments with you in this life journey that we all have. And please stay in touch. Leave us your emails in case we have not received them yet, so we can stay in touch. Yes, I've already read that. Thank you. And I bid everyone a very beautiful evening, beautiful morning, afternoon, twilight, wherever and whenever you may be. And this class has been broadcast live, and also can be seen anytime you like after we upload it. So feel free to access it and share it with anyone. The power of transcending time and space. You can get information anywhere, anytime, to anyone. Thank you very much.